Brazil has had several forms of government since its independence in 1822, including a monarchy from 1822 to 1889, a first republic from 1889 to 1930, a military dictatorship from 1964 to 1985, and a democratic republic from 1985 to present. Here is a list of heads of state across these periods. Dom Pedro I ruled from 1822 to 1831. He declared Brazil's independence from Portugal. Dom Pedro II took over from 1831 to 1889. He was the last emperor, deposed in a military coup in 1889, ending the monarchy. Teodoro da Fonseca became Brazil's first president and ruled from 1889 to 1891. He led the coup that overthrew the monarchy. He later resigned after political instability and an economic crisis. Floriano Peixoto took over from 1891 to 189. He suppressed revolts and opposition to maintain stability. He is known as the Iron Marshal for his authoritarian style. Prudente de Moraes was the first civilian president that led Brazil from 1894 to 1898. He focused on political stabilization after military rule and faced revolts, but promoted economic development. Campos Sales took over from 1898 to 1902. He focused on economic reforms and debt reduction and introduced policies favoring coffee planters. Rodrigues Alves led Brazil from 1902 to 1906. He modernized Rio de Janeiro and strengthened Brazil's international reputation. Afonso Pena took over from 1906 to 1909. He expanded railways and immigration policies before later dying in office in 1909. Nilo Pequeno became the president after Pena's death and ruled from 1909 to 1910. He established Brazil's first Ministry of Agriculture, Industry, and Commerce. Hermes de Fonseca took over from 1910 to 1914. He led military reforms and expanded infrastructure and suppressed Canudo's rebellion in the Northeast. Venceslau Braz ruled from 1914 to 1918. During his tenure, he led Brazil through World War I, declaring war on Germany. He also strengthened industrialization and economic growth. Delfim Moreira became interim president from 1918 to 1919 after Rodrigues Alves died. Before taking office, he held power briefly before new elections. Epitácio Pessoa became the president from 1919 to 1922. He focused on infrastructure and drought relief in the Northeast. He also strengthened Brazil's role in international diplomacy. Artur Bernardes took over from 1922 to 1926. He faced multiple military revolts and ruled under a state of emergency. He also strengthened coffee industry policies. Washington Luiz took over office in 1926 to 1930. He focused on modernizing transportation and infrastructure before he was overthrown in 1930 due to economic crisis and political opposition. Getulio Vargas took over power in the Revolution of 1930, and he ruled from 1930 to 1945, overthrowing the First Republic. He ruled first as a provisional leader from 1930 to 1934, then as an elected president from 1934 to 1937, and finally as a dictator from 1937 to 1945, under the Estado Novo regime. He focused on industrialization and labor rights, created CLT, labor laws. He was later overthrown in 1945 by the military. José Linares took over as an interim president from 1945 to 1946 after Vargas' fall. He led a transitional government and organized democratic elections. Eurico Gaspar Dutra took office from 1946 to 1951. He allowed democracy to return after Vargas' dictatorship, strengthened ties with the U.S. during the Cold War, and outlawed the Communist Party. Getulio Vargas returned to power from 1951 to 1954 via democratic elections. He created Petrobras, the state oil company. He faced opposition from business elites and the military before later committing suicide in 1954 amid political crisis. Café Filho was the vice president then, and he took office after the death of Vargas and ruled from 1954 to 1955. He tried to stabilize the economy after Vargas' death and was later removed due to health issues and political instability. Carlos Luz took over as an interim president in 1955, but stayed for only 3 days in office. He attempted a coup, but was removed by the military. Nero Ramos took office as an interim president from 1955 to 1956, and he ensured peaceful transfer of power. Juscelino Kubitschek took over from 1956 to 1961. He built Brasilia, making it the new capital of Brazil in 1960. He focused on economic growth, 50 years in 5 plan, and expanded infrastructure, roads, and energy production. Jânio Quadros won elections in 1961, but he later resigned mysteriously after 7 months. He attempted anti-corruption measures, and he had controversial policies, such as awarding Che Guevara Medal. João Goulart took over office from 1961 to 1964. He advocated for land reform and workers' rights, but he also faced economic crisis and opposition from the military. He was later removed by the 1964 military coup, marking the start of the dictatorship. Marshal Castelo Branco became the first military ruler from 1964 to 1967 after the 1964 coup. He restricted political freedoms, started press censorship. He created repressive laws like AI 2, which banned opposition parties. Marshal Artur da Costa e Silva took over from 1967 to 1969. He passed AI 5, which gave the government absolute power and increased repression. He faced student protests and guerrilla movements, but was later removed due to health issues. Military Junta was a temporary military that ruled in the year 1969. IT was led by 3 generals after Costa e Silva's illness. General Emilio Garrastazu Medici ruled from 1969 to 1974. He ruled during the Years of Lead, the most repressive period. He tortured and arrested political opponents. Despite repression, Brazil saw rapid economic growth, which is also known as the Brazilian miracle. General Ernesto Geisel took over from 1974 to 1979. He started a slow political opening distanceo. He also reduced censorship and repression, and he prepared the end of military rule. General João Figueiredo took over from 1979 to 1985. He passed the amnesty law in 1979, allowing exiled politicians to return. He also allowed opposition parties to compete again. He faced economic decline and protests and oversaw the transition to democracy in 1985. José Sarney assumed office in 1985 to 1990, following the death of President-elect Tancredo Neves before his inauguration. He oversaw the transition from military rule to democracy and promulgated the new democratic constitution in 1988. He faced economic challenges, including hyperinflation. Fernando Collor de Mello was elected as the first president by direct popular vote and reigned from 1990 to 1992. He implemented neoliberal economic reforms to stabilize the economy. He faced massive corruption allegations leading to impeachment proceedings. He later resigned in 1992 amid the impeachment process. Itamar Franco assumed office after Collor's resignation and ruled from 1992 to 1995. He launched the Plano Real, a successful economic plan that stabilized the Brazilian currency and curbed hyperinflation, and he also restored political stability following the impeachment crisis. Itamar Franco assumed office after Collor's resignation and ruled from 1992 to 1995. He launched the Plano Real, a successful economic plan that stabilized the Brazilian currency and curbed hyperinflation, and he also restored political stability following the impeachment crisis. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva ruled from 2003 to 2011. He implemented social programs like Bolsa Familia, reducing poverty and income inequality. He also presided over significant economic growth and increased Brazil's international prominence. He was later re-elected in 2006 for a second term. Dilma Rousseff became the first woman to be elected as president of Brazil and ruled from 2011 to 2016. She continued social programs initiated by her predecessor. She faced economic downturns and massive anti-corruption investigations, notably the Operation Car Wash scandal. She was later impeached and removed from office in 2016 on charges of fiscal mismanagement. Michel Temer assumed the presidency from 2016 to 2018. He pursued austerity measures and labor reforms to address economic challenges and faced low approval ratings and corruption allegations. Jair Bolsonaro ruled from 2019 to 2023. He implemented conservative policies and sought to reduce the size of the federal government. He faced criticism for environmental policies and handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was re-elected in 2022 after previously serving 2 terms. He aims to address economic inequality and environmental concerns and seeks to restore Brazil's global standing and strengthen democratic institutions.